Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to Part 3, CERN for Dummies, Mandela Effect, Geography of the World Has Changed. Really need to go to Part 1 and 2 first. This is Part 3. Look in the comments for the link, because we're picking up where we left off. The parables. I will now discuss what I believe the deep spiritual truth of each of the parables of the leaven and the mustard seed are in the book of Matthew. Each parable begins with another parable he, which means that they are related to each other. In Matthew 13:33, Jesus is referring to the three fields of physics. Contemporary physicists are only aware of two of them, at least on the unclassified level. They are the quantum field and the field of general relativity. These two fields explain all the laws of physics. However, they can't seem to unify these two fields. They are completely separate. That's because they are missing a field of physics that has not yet been discovered. Well, it's been discovered. If I discovered it, trust me, they know about it. They just don't want you to know. I was deeply involved in classified things when I was in the military, and I'm not going to get into that. This is all my work, and this is all my theories I've been working on for the last 20 years, so this is unclassified. Everything I'm talking about, this is my work. Or you can say it belongs to the... Anyway, it's God's work. Let's give it all to God, folks. Anyway, it is a field of physics that is beyond the physical sense, the invisible field. Here, Jesus clearly tells us that there are three parts to heaven. The leaven, which is like yeast used to make bread rise, is the energy that is placed and works in each field universe, making all of life as we know it. So this is the leaven right here, and it's placed right there in that field, right here, and right here. But what it really is, Jesus is saying it's energy. Energy is placed here, here, and here. So we have Bible and we have physics. They just didn't have a way to explain. I mean, how do you explain energy back then? I mean, they didn't have a cell phone. They didn't have electricity. Jeez, oh man. Anyway, the leaven, which is like yeast used to make bread rise, is the energy that is placed and works in each field universe, making all of life as we know it possible. The three measures of meal are the three fields of physics. The three containers protect each field universe so it may rise and take form, just as the meal, which is like bread dough, does. So the circle or container on the left is the field of general relativity, which I think you can figure that out right here. The circle or container in the center is the invisible field. I just call it invisible because I don't have a better name for it right now. The circle or container on the right is quantum field. This is the quantum field of physics. The physicists were right that there are only two fields that cannot be unified with their understanding of the universe. Scientists will not be able to unify and find the origin of everything until one accepts that there is a field of physics that they cannot detect with human senses. M-theory actually has done a pretty good job of doing this. I wrote this paper. Well, it was copyrighted in 1999. Since then, they've done a pretty good job of explaining this concept. But back, 20 years ago, they didn't. Anyway, moving right along. The theory of everything cannot be solved until everything is actually in the theory. So hopefully by now you picked up this is the container that I talked about, which is actually, oh boy, we're going to get into this later. The container is actually the quantum field of circles and boundary field. And then, of course, we have heaven, which is this black line right here, which is the theory of everything. What you're looking at here in black is a mathematical logarithm. It is, you solve this equation and you solve the theory of everything. It's right there in front of your face. The theory of everything, folks, has been solved, and they're hiding it from you, just like free energy and everything else. But the woman hid the leaven. She hid it. This represents that the field of physics and the origin are hid and kept separate from each other. Even Jesus talked about what would happen, and it's kind of funny. It's like a prediction here. Wow, that's interesting. Anyway, moving on. The general relativity field of physics is kept separate from the center invisible field of physics and or the outside field. The quantum field on the outside is kept separate from the center field and general relativity. Quote, All quotes are from the King James Bible. Which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal, till the whole was leavened. Unquote. When it is all leavened, this simply represents when everything is ready. When making bread, you let it rise to a certain point, and then it is ready to bake. You wouldn't bake it before it has risen all the way, and if it rises too much, ooh, here's the bad news to the parable, folks. Pay attention. Not only do you don't bake it, if you check out, ask the bread maker. You have to push it back down. Wait for it to rise again and start all over. Does this sound familiar? Anyone familiar with the Hopi prophecy stone? Talking about the earth that have been destroyed and recreated, the different cycles. Jesus is describing this for us, folks. So she hid the 3 measures of meal until a moment in time. This moment is when the 3 measures of meal, the 3 fields of physics, are leavened when they're ready. Then what? Well, perhaps all will be revealed at this moment in time. Guess what, folks? It's arrived. It is that moment in time to be revealed, and is being revealed to you right now. We can find proof of such a time in the book of Mark, chapter 4, verse 22, by Jesus telling us, quote, "For there is nothing hidden which will not be revealed, nor has anything been kept secret, but that it should come to light." Unquote. But what is this moment in time for? What will happen? Let's look at the parable of the mustard seed in Matthew 13:33. Quote, "The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field, which is indeed the least of all the seeds. But when it is grown, it is greater than the herbs and becomes a tree. So the birds of the air come and nest in its branches." Unquote. The theologian interpretation is that the parable of the mustard seed teaches that the mustard seed teaches the destined greatness of the kingdom. The kingdom fulfilled by Jesus now looks insignificant, but its greatness will be apparent in its consummation at the end of the age. In my theory of harmony, the mustard seed represents physical matter. In comparison to all of God's creations, it may appear to be viewed as his least. The field is the universe. When it is grown, represents when it is ready or leavened. The birds represent everyone that will be part of the new heaven. They will nest in its branches, represents a new home for God's kingdom. The book of Revelation, chapter 21, says, quote, "Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth," unquote. Hence my hint at the Mandela equation, and the geography of the world has changed. But that may not be for everybody. Moving right along. So it's become clear, or should I say, it becomes clear that at a specific moment, matter was created and is transforming into something greater. That's pretty deep. We will discuss later as to what it is transforming into. But for now, how does the universe work? We are now moving into the next chapter of my book, and I apparently have misplaced a page. So we are... Oh, by the way, here's the table of contents. So far we've covered Einstein's unification theory. We just went over the parables, and now we're going to cover the throne of God. Ooh-wee! This is a big one. So let's get started. I'm going to read for a couple minutes, and then my camera has a gremlin in it. It seems like I shouldn't say that. Just kidding. It likes to stop every now and then, so it'll be stopping in just a moment. Here we are, the throne of God. The Apostle John wrote the book of Revelation between 70 and 95 A.D. Chapter 4 is an attempt by the Apostle John to write down what he saw as he was in the Spirit and taken through a door in heaven to see the throne of God. The Apostle John lived in a world that was not full of technology that we have today. The people of that time even believed that the world was flat. Can you imagine trying to describe the awesomeness of the higher dimensions of the spirit world and the great task of all to describe the Almighty's throne? This would be a difficult task for anybody today to accomplish. This is what John wrote. Quote, Revelation chapter 4, verses 3 through 8. And he who sat there was like jasper and sardis, stone in appearance. And there was a rainbow around the throne in appearance like an emerald. Around the throne were 24 thrones, and on the thrones I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in white robes, and they had crowns of gold on their heads. And from the throne proceeded lightnings and thunderings and voices. 7 lamps of fire were burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. Before the throne was a sea of glass, like crystal. And in the midst of the throne and around the throne were 4 living creatures full of eyes in front and in back. The first living creature was like a lion. The second living creature was like a calf. The third living creature has a face like a man. And the fourth living creature was like a flying eagle. The 4 living creatures, each having 6 wings, were full of eyes around and within. And they do not rest day or night, saying, Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. Let's look at how the theologians would interpret this passage of the Bible. 24 elders are the celestial representatives of all the redeemed, glorified and enthroned to worship continuously. White robes symbolize purity. The crowns suggest victory and joy, not political authority. Lightnings and thunderings describe the awesomeness and wondrous power of God. The 7 lamps of fire represents the 7 spirits of God, the Holy Spirit. The sea of glass, like crystal, denotes the unapproachableness and majesty of God. 4 living creatures, a cherubim, the highest ranking celestial beings. They represent all the vital forces. Even the theologians agree with this one. Isn't that funny? They represent all the vital forces of creation. Well, the next part they got kind of close. But anyway, whose primary function is worship. Full of eyes symbolizes unceasing watchfulness. The 4 symbols suggest majestic courage, strength, intelligence, and speed in the service of the Creator. The 4 living creatures were not alike in appearance. The theologians are correct when they say that their 4 beasts represents all the vital forces of creation. I seriously doubt that Paul knew, or even the theologians knew, that scientists would discover that there are 4 different and distinct forces that can explain everything we see, touch, smell, hear, and taste. These 4 forces can explain everything we experience. I believe that the 4 living creatures represent more than just cherubim, the highest ranking celestial beings. The lion represents the strong nuclear force. The calf represents the weak nuclear force. The face like a man represents the electromagnetic force. The eagle represents gravity. And in the midst of the throne and around the throne were 4 living creatures full of eyes in front and back. This represents the 4 forces physically around the throne and in the midst. And now I am supposed to go to figure 3, which is over here. Quit being stubborn. Here we go. Figure. And okay, figure 3. All right. Oh boy, sorry this is a little crooked, but anyway, here we go. Moving right along. So here we have, yes, the 4 living creatures. In the diagram here, this is the electromagnetic force. This is gravity. This is the weak nuclear force, and this is the strong nuclear force. This is the throne of God, which is, of course, in the center. And in the midst, this is the weak nuclear force. It gets complicated, but you gotta follow this line down, and it hits here. So in the midst, this is actually the weak nuclear force. It's opposite. There's a purpose to these triangle sacred geometry and how forces work. It's basically it's an angle. It's an amplifier to the energy The energy comes in, gets amplified, and bounces back in. Well, I'm going to cover that later. All right, so here we have gravity. Again, this is gravity. This is, in other words, the living creature in the mist. We have the electromagnetic opposite of it over here. This is also the electromagnetic, this little triangle. And then we have the strong nuclear force. Opposite of it is this little triangle. So now we have the four living creatures, which are around the throne of God and in the mist. And this seems like a good moment to take a break because I think my lunch has just arrived. Get back to you shortly. And look in the comments for links to the other video for the next part, part 4.